BSN.
I'm Warren Moon, and I'll tell you why 13-0 might be bad luck for your fantasy team.
I'm Eric Kramer, and will the Chargers breeze through the Colts' resting defense?
I'm Andrew Siciliano, and oye como va? Stay away from Santana Moss.
I'm Patrick O'Neill. All that plus backup running backs getting their due, and Sean Alexander, master of the obscure NFL record. The Ultimate Fantasy Football Show starts right now. Week 15 of the Ultimate Fantasy Football Show. Yeah, that's Zorro for you. Okay, so I lost, and these three guys are in the semifinals. That's fine. I did not use my pull, my cachet, to win that game.
Kick back and relax
You're
this
that
week,
far out of it, the pull wouldn't even help you get the
I think you're absolutely right. But you know what? We are here for you to help you guys move on in your fantasy leagues. Let's get things started with our Fantasy Flash. It is the #1 topic in the NFL. Now that the Colts have clinched everything there is to clinch, will they rest their stars or go for perfection? Peyton Manning, Edgerrin James, Marvin Harrison, and Reggie Wayne, they're all fantasy studs. And this situation has a lot of fantasy owners actually very nervous. So, Warren Moon, what would you do? If you got any of these guys, do you start them with confidence?
Well, I think the million-dollar question is, what is Tony Dungy going to do over the next 3 weeks? I think this week, everybody's safe on that Colts offense. I think they're going to go out and try and win this football game. They're going to play all their starters, and they're going to try and stay sharp as they go down the stretch. Now, what happens in this game, if they lose, maybe you could see wholesale changes next week. So this is going to be kind of a week-to-week basis. And the only guy I would be concerned about is Edgerrin James. In the second half, maybe you don't give him as many carries because the guy is on pace to set a record for carries in a season. Take a little wear and tear off of his body.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, they're in this thing to win the Super Bowl, that 19th game, not the 16th game. And so, but if you listen to anything that Tony Dungy is saying this week, he's looking at this next stretch of games almost like the preseason. He wants to keep the team oiled up, but he's not going to risk injury. So I think they are safe this week because it's so far out in the future. They want to keep this thing going. But at the same time, look over the course of the next week or two, these guys could be sitting the bench. That's why it's real important right now to go out and get a solid backup. Maybe a Dominic Rose, maybe a Cedric Houston. To replace a guy like Edgerrin James is probably going to be on the bench. And the mindset they've got, I think they're going to lose one of these next two games.
Yeah, or maybe a James Mungro, too. You know, here's hoping that your league actually finishes Week 16 and not Week 17. Because if your league finishes Week 17 and it's that Cardinal game, regardless of what happens in the next two, you might be totally out of luck with these Colts. Edgerrin James, I've ridden him a long way. And if I don't get him those last 2 weeks, I'm going to be ticked.
Yeah, it's a fine line. Sometimes you don't want to lose going into the playoffs because you lose momentum. But then again, you want to try and rest guys and keep them healthy.
But real quickly, Warren, what do the players want to do? Peyton Manning, does he want to go for the record?
Those players want to play. They know about history. They know that they could be a part of something very special. So they'd love to play and keep winning games, but they're not the coach. They got to think. He's got to think a little bit further down the line.
Okay, we move on. Of course, there will be another team on the field versus the Colts on Sunday. We know the Chargers will not be sitting anybody as they're fighting for their playoff lives. Their quarterback, Drew Brees, has been inconsistent as a fantasy starter, especially on the road. Only 6 of his 22 touchdown passes have come outside of San Diego. Eric Kramer. So the Chargers are in a must-win situation. What kind of game do you expect out of Brees?
Well, I expect a huge game out of Brees, and it's because of that must-win situation. You look back last week, Pittsburgh Steelers had to play a tough Bear game. They had to answer, even though the last 3 weeks they'd done nothing. San Diego in the same situation now, and that's why I think Brees is going to answer big on the road. You mentioned the inconsistency in terms of numbers, but quarterback rating, 3 of his 6 road games have been over 100, so maybe they're not huge numbers, but he's playing well, and he's going to have all that this week. And I think this Colts defense really is overrated. They got a lot of guys sitting on the bench this week, resting up. But as well, they haven't played anybody at home this year, and Brees came off a great game in Week 16 last year, putting up 290 yards and 3 touchdowns against these Colts. He'll have another big day on Sunday.
Who wins the game?
I think the Chargers are going to win this game. The mindset's there.
All right. There you go. You heard it here first. Through the first half of the season, Santana Moss keyed a revolution in the Redskins' offense, but then opposing teams figured him out. Moss's production has plummeted. So, Andrew Siciliano, would you start him on your fantasy team versus the Cowboys this weekend?
I would only start him if you like a 7-point receiver, because that's in essence what Santana Moss is. You know, he started the season, as Patrick pointed out, like Randy Moss, and he's finishing it like like really Kate Moss, but he's keeping his shirt on and his jersey on for really most of the game. You know, he's a 65-yard receiver. That's his high since David Patton went out week 10. And since David Patton went out, you double cover Santana, and really there's nothing much there. Now, Dallas last week, second half, had a lot of trouble pass D against Trent Green of the Chiefs, but the Redskins are going to run the football. The Dallas run D is beaten down. Santana Moss is only your guy if you need a solid 7 points.
Thanks for the Kate Moss reference, Andrew.
Yeah, man.
Not trying to pile on the bad news here, but yet another guy who has fallen off in the second half is Eli Manning. Just when Peyton started to heat up, his little bro has regressed. Yardage is up, yes, but so are his interceptions. Warren, do you like Eli against the Chiefs?
Yeah, Patrick, this is kind of a questionable play this week. You know, Eli Manning has really struggled the last 5 weeks. The last 2 weeks, only 1 touchdown, 5 interceptions. And I'm looking at him play, and I'm seeing that his technique and his fundamentals are starting to suffer a little bit. And he's starting to get a little bit fatigued. And we saw that same thing in Ben Roethlisberger last year at the end of the season. That long season in your first year in the NFL really gets to you. So I think that, combined with the fact that defensive coordinators now know how to play him, know how to take away the things that he really likes, he's starting to struggle a little bit late in the season. But he still has a lot of great weapons around him. And you got Jeremy Shockey, who I think is going to have a big game this week because the Chiefs do a good job of taking away wide receivers. So Eli could probably still get about 208 yards and maybe a touchdown.
Sounds like a big, fat benching. All right, in fantasy drafts this year, Carson Palmer was the 11th quarterback drafted on average, and he's the #1 QB in fantasy points. He did have a rough outing on Sunday. Will he bounce back for that? We play
More or less.
All right, Andrew, does Palmer throw for more or less than 1.5 TDs versus the Lions?
I think he's okay. I'm going to say more here for Carson Palmer. You know, the Bengals mailed it in last week. They had the referees win the game for them in the fourth quarter. I think Carson Palmer is good enough this week for 3 touchdowns, breaking Kenny Anderson's team record.
Kerry Collins is back in at QB for the Raiders. Warren, will that help Lamont Jordan to more or less than 100 total yards versus the Browns?
I'm going to have to say more. Kerry Collins being in the lineup will help him. He loves to dump the ball off to Lamont Jordan. Lamont Jordan averages 125 yards, total yards, at home this year.
The Cardinals-Texans game sounds kind of boring, but it probably won't be for Anquan Boldin. Will he go for more or less than 100 yards, Eric?
Absolutely more. Now, if there's a for sure thing in fantasy football, Anquan Boldin is it. 4 straight games he's had now going over 100 yards. And who's going to stop him on that Houston defense? They're ranked 30th in the league.
The Titans' run D is about all they have going for them. Will Sean Alexander score more or less than 1.5 TDs in Tennessee?
I'm going to say more. You know, the only thing that's more of a lock than Anquan Boldin is Sean Alexander. He has 2 touchdowns in 4 consecutive road games.
So don't bench him.
No, don't
okay,
bench
all right.
him.
Torrey Holt is pretty much the lone bright spot for the Rams right now. Warren, will he get more or less than 100 yards versus Philly?
I'm going to have to say less. He's catching a lot of balls right now, but with Ryan Fitzpatrick in the lineup, he's only averaging 85 yards a game. And also, Philadelphia's only given up 3 100-yard receivers this year.
Finally, Eric, will Antonio Gates get more or less than 100 yards versus the Colts?
I'm going to say more here. Now, he has to have a huge game for the Chargers to win this game. Now, 2 of his 4 100-yard games have come on the road, and he's got Bob Sanders at safety, who's a strong hitter, but at 5'8", no match for Gates.
All right, still plenty more to come, including stud or dud, more NFL records from Sean Alexander, and viewer emails with, "You killed me, LTU." But first, let's see who's blowing up. Steve Smith lit up the Saints earlier this season. Round 2 is Sunday. LT is right at home in the end zone in any stadium he plays. And Mark Brunell had a big fantasy day versus the Cowboys earlier this season. Now it's the rematch. The Ultimate Fantasy Football Show is coming right back.
Ultimate Fantasy Football is brought to you by Levi's, the original. Find your style at Levi's.com.
Welcome back to the Ultimate Fantasy Football Show. Time for viewer emails with "You Killed Me." Jeremy starts us off. "Carson Palmer, you killed me. I should have played Arnold Palmer. At least he could drive the ball 93 yards." Andrew.
All right, guys. Elvin in Vegas. "Kevin Curtis, you killed me. I should have started Tony Curtis. At least I could have been entertained while I was doing my Patrick O'Neal imitation. Losing, Warren.
Eli writes, Willis McGahee, you killed me. If Todd Bridges would have told me I would have gotten the same amount of points from him as McGahee, I would have said, what you talking about, Willis? Eric.
Fellas, Teak doesn't like his kicker. John Casey, you killed me. Make just one field goal, miss another. I should have started KC and the Sunshine Band. John, here's a little tune for you. Do a little dance. Make a little love. Your cut tonight.
I just feel awkward with you saying make a little love, so I want to move on quickly and play a little game we call
Stud or Dud.
Yeah, looking at some running backs. Andrew is you're just Mr. Negative today,
That's
buddy.
me.
Yeah, you don't like any of these guys match up this week. Warren and Eric agree on everything, and if you've got other options, avoid or done versus the Bears. Andrew, why is Corey Dillon a dud this week?
Not a big Corey Dillon fan this week because they're playing the Buccaneers. Number 5 run D in the NFL. Simply don't like the matchup. That Buccaneer run D last week held Deshaun Foster to only 46 yards.
But I like Corey Dillon this week because he is healthy, and that's the one thing that he hasn't been all season long. He's averaged 23 touches the last couple of games and a touchdown in each game since he's been back. He's going up against a very small, undersized Tampa Bay defensive front in the cold weather. I like Corey Dillon under these circumstances.
All right, Andrew, Sam Congato, he's either having a great game or he's not. You've sort of had a hard time where to place him. What do you like from him this week?
That's a nice way to say a hard time.
Yeah.
Whatever I say with Sam Congato, I'm wrong, but I don't like him this week against the Ravens. The Ravens last week in Denver, mind you, pretty much shut down that Denver run defense. Statistically not that great, but the Ravens have allowed only 8 touchdowns this year on the ground.
Well, at least you're not bitter about it. And
No,
actually,
not
this
at
week,
all.
you're right about being wrong. And the fact is, Sam Congato's a great play because any NFL back that's going to get 20 carries a game is going to get you points. And that's what he's got in the last 5 out of the last 6 weeks. He's gotten 6 touchdowns during that time in this Baltimore defense the last several weeks. In addition to shutting down Denver, they've also given up 155 yards to Dominic Davis. Rudy Johnson ripped him up. He's a good play.
All right, on to some receivers. It's tough to be too crazy about any of these guys. A split decision on Jurevicius and Curtis. Nobody likes Key this week. Warren, you work with the Seahawks as the radio announcer, and even with Darrell Jackson coming back, you think Jurevicius is a good play?
Yeah, I like where Joe Jurevicius has come with this offense. He started out slow this year, but because he's had to play because of injury, Matt Hasselbeck has a lot of confidence in him right now. He's his #1 red zone receiver. He leads the team in touchdown passes. 4 of those touchdown passes have come in the red zone. And he's one of those big receivers at 6'5". You throw it up to him and he makes plays. Last week had a touchdown called back, but he made a great catch. So he's that guy that I think Hasselbeck has that confidence in, and he'll go with him this week.
Started out slow. That's the understatement of the year. The guy had 7 catches in his first 4 games as the #3 receiver. I think he's going to be going back to the #3 receiver now that Ingram and Darrell Jackson are both healthy again. During that time, he wasn't catching any balls. Here they come back. Got to get ready for that playoff chase. It's all going to be about Darrell Jackson this week.
Andrew, you've decided to go positive on us. Why is Kevin Curtis a stud versus Philly?
It's the holiday season. I don't want to be the Grinch for everyone. I know Kevin Curtis has 5 catches his last 3 weeks, but I think this week against that Eagles secondary, which does give up the big play, finally he and Ryan Fitzpatrick hook up.
Well, it only pays to be a St. Louis receiver if you're Torrey Holt with a rookie quarterback, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now that he's come back down to earth after that Houston game, Kevin Curtis, 4 catches, 19 yards, 0 touchdowns. Not going to happen again this week.
Earlier this year, Sean Alexander scored his 15th touchdown, making it 5 straight seasons of 15 or more. Not only is that impressive, it's an NFL record. It's obscure, but it's a record just the same. And he has done it again, and he makes our stupid stat of the week. The obscure records continue to pile up. With 108 yards versus the Niners, Alexander became the first NFL player to rush for 100 yards in 9 straight divisional games, topping Marcus Allen, Walter Payton, and the immortal Freeman McNeil. Like I said before, it's obscure, but it is still a record. The Ultimate Fantasy Football Show is coming right back. This is the Ultimate Fantasy Football Show, and it is time to play
Contender or Pretender.
So, with Brian Westbrook done for the year, Eagles rookie Ryan Moats got a chance to show his stuff, and that stuff is pretty explosive, apparently. Scored on TD runs of 40 and 18 yards. Warren, I don't know. Does Moats float your boat? Is he a contender or a pretender?
Well, for the Vikings' sake, let's stay away from those boat jokes. But I like Ryan Moats this week as a contender because he's pretty much all they have on offense. Their quarterbacks have really struggled in the passing game, so they're going to run the football. And he'll get a lot of runs this week because the Rams' defense is so bad against the run, 30th in the league. They've given up 700-yard rushers, and they've given up the most rushing touchdowns, 18. So look for Ryan Moats to maybe get 100 yards of combined yardage and also a touchdown.
A similar problem for the Jets. Curtis Martin is done for the year, meaning rookie Cedric Houston will get the ball and often. Houston picked up 28 carries last week, only 74 yards, but he did score. So, Eric, is Houston a contender or a pretender?
Oh, there's no doubt. He's a contender because this is exactly what you want to get from a guy at this point in the season. Guy steps in, is getting all the carries. The only person he has to compete carries with is B.J. Askew, a backup fullback. Not going to happen. Here's a guy that's taken on Miami Dolphins defense. They're ranked 21st against the run. They've been banged up recently. Lamont Jordan hit him for a couple touchdowns. Reuben Drones went for 160 yards and a touchdown. Great play this week for Cedric Houston. And looking down the road, he may be a guy that can replace an Edgerrin James if he gets put on the bench.
A few years from now, Jerome Bettis will be a Hall of Famer, but injuries have slowed the bus considerably this year until he broke out with 100 yards and a couple of scores versus the NFL's top-ranked defense. So, Andrew, I BJ ask you, any chance he'll repeat that versus the Vikes, or is he a pretender?
I don't think so. I think he's a pretender. And hi, I'm the guy who actually benched Jerome Bettis last week and then sat there rooting against him when he started doing well. Why do we do that? Why do guys like me actually root against him? Look, Jerome Bettis is a third back at best this week. I can't see him taking that pounding 2 consecutive weeks, especially this week. They are in the Dome. They are on turf. I think this is a Willie Parker week, not a Jerome Bettis week.
At this point in the fantasy season, one bad lineup decision can kill you, like, say, to sit Terry Glenn last week. Well, for that, we're going to help answer our viewers' questions with
Start or sit.
All right, Andrew Tony wants to know, should he start Trent Green versus the Giants or David Hard G. Garrard versus the Niners?
I'm going to take David Hard G. Garrard, thanks for the reminder, against the Niners. First off, it's the Niners. Second off, Garrard looked pretty good last week, especially late against the Colts. I like it.
All right, Warren, how about Jason? Should he start Clinton Portis versus the Cowboys or Dominic Davis against the Cards?
I'm going to go with Dominic Davis versus the Cards. The Cards defense has given up the second most rushing touchdowns this year, 17. And over the last 3 games, Dominic Davis is averaging 160 total yards and has a couple of touchdowns.
EK Kevin can't decide between Ronnie Brown versus the Jets or Mike Anderson versus the Bills.
Kevin, I'm going to say Mike Anderson. Now, neither one of these guys is really doing much lately, and they're both taking on very bad defenses, so they should rebound. But if I want to put my money on one, I'd go Mike Anderson. I think Ronnie Brown's hitting that rookie wall.
Andrew, should Rich start Amani Tuma versus the Chiefs or Bobby Ingram versus the Titans?
Rich, I like Bobby Ingram here. He has 57 catches, and remember, he missed 3 games as well. Plus, I think he benefits from Darrell Jackson's return this week.
Warren, should Andy go with Donald Driver versus the Ravens or Randy Moss versus the Browns?
I'm going to go with Randy Moss versus the Browns. And for my team's sake, Randy, I need a big game out of you this week. Kerry Collins is back in the lineup. He's got the big arm to get it down the field to him. And if you take away the San Diego game when he was injured, at home, he averages 82 yards a game. So, Randy, come up big for me this week.
All right, finally, Jeff can't decide between Chris Chambers versus the Jets or Terry Glenn versus the Skins. Eric, what's wrong with you?
Jeff, what's the problem? First of all, Chris Chambers is your pick. He's the hottest receiver in the NFL right now. Last 3 weeks, he's been thrown to the most, or tied for the most with 48. Leads in yards with 460. He's got 3 touchdowns. It's a no-brainer.
And he helped knock me out of the playoffs. That's right. Better. We have our own fantasy league. You guys, the experts, are in the semifinals. The host, he's not doing so well. I'm here to talk, though, so no big deal. The Ultimate Fantasy Football Show coming right back. Welcome back to the Ultimate Fantasy Football Show. As the fantasy football playoffs march on, some of us advanced, Eric, some of us didn't.
You?
Yeah, that was me. Last week, let's call it my Waterloo. FoxSports.com columnist Peter Schrager took care of business. Bad game from LT and leaving Terry Glenn on my bench. Do me. Eric, how were you able to beat the producers, David and Andrew?
Well, all I can say is it's good that I cashed my check. When you're trying to beat the bosses, you know what I'm saying? I think I'm going to take that money, actually, and go buy my guys go Ruben Drones this week. Buy some watches. Maybe Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson.
You get paid to do this? Interesting. Interesting. All right, so our playoff bracket looks like this. Andrew and Warren enjoyed their bye week. Now it's back to work, which brings us to our games of the week. Warren Moon comes off the bye week with a very tough matchup. Peter Schrager's won 6 straight games.
Who is Peter Schrager? Has he ever been to one of our meetings?
No.
Who is this guy?
No, well, he looks a little green.
Well, I think he's scared.
Is that what it is?
He looks scared.
He does. All right, now looking at this is a big matchup between Andrew and Eric. These two have met before. Andrew, what do you think?
I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him.
That's analysis. That's breaking
I'm
it down.
going to kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Why? Because I'm better. And I Peyton Manning. That's why. I Peyton Manning. Right.
That's the reason.
That good?
All right. Very good. Good luck, everybody out there in the
That's all
playoffs.
man needs.
Eric Kramer,
time.
Eric won't be here
and
next week.
Siciliano, Patrick
Money
O'Neill.
time.
And there were one.
Peace out.
From dishing the dirt to airing it out with our resident quarterback, Warren Moon. Warren, let's start with the Patriots hosting the Bucs. Tampa hasn't had much success in the cold. They are from Florida. But temperatures aside, do they have enough firepower to weather the Patriots, who can clinch with a win?
Well, whenever you can play defense, Laura, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can, they're one of the tops in the league. And also when you can run the football, Cadillac Williams back in swing after being hurt earlier in the season, you can play with anybody. But it's going to be a tough environment for young Chris Sims to go up into New England and play in front of that crowd. It's going to probably be really cold, like you said, probably around 27 degrees at game time. And then you're playing against a pretty good football team that's starting to get their swagger back a little bit. They got Corey Dillon back in the lineup now. They're starting to do some good things. Falk is back in the lineup, so they feel much better about the way they're playing. And it's going to be tough for Tampa Bay, but again, if they can play defense and run the football, they'll have a chance.
Okay, the other big Saturday game is the Chiefs at the Giants. Both teams can score. Both can play some defense. Who do you like?
Well, both of these teams are going to run the football because the weather could be a problem. You got that swirling wind that happens in Meadowlands Stadium. I'd have to give the advantage to the Chiefs right now because Antonio Pierce, the Giants' middle linebacker, probably won't play in this football game, and he's a big run stopper on their defense. You got to be able to stop Larry Johnson. He's got over 100 yards in his last 6 games and 10 touchdowns. So if this comes down to a field goal, though, Laura, both of these field goal kickers, Lawrence Tynes and also Jay Feely, they've had a lot of problems making those last-second field goals.
Two teams trying to make the playoffs, the Steelers and Vikings. Pittsburgh has beaten their last 6 NFC opponents, while the Vikings have won 6 straight under Brad Johnson. Whose playoff hopes continue?
Well, Pittsburgh has to keep winning, and so does Minnesota. Both of these teams have to keep winning all the way out, I think, in order to make the playoffs. Pittsburgh even more so, and they have to go out on the road. It gets very loud in the Metrodome, so that's something they're going to have to deal with. But I think Pittsburgh, again, is back into their groove again. They're running the football well as they did last week, and they're going to try and make this a physical, hard-nosed, punishing football game, Steeler type of football.
Let's talk Colts and Chargers. Right now, Warren, you are Tony Dungy. You have nothing to gain from this outcome, and you have a close game going into the fourth quarter. Are you playing your starters, or are you sitting them?
I think in this, the 15th week of the season, you keep playing them and you're going to try and win it. Now, if you ask me that question next week in week 16 and 17, maybe he's pulled those guys out before the fourth quarter even gets there. So this week, I think Tony definitely wants to win this football game at home, win his 14th game in a row, and then he'll kind of see how things happen after that.
The always perfect Warren Moon. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Warren.
Happy holidays, Laura.
don't know how many superlatives you can use. An explosion, a display, a whooping. Here you see Reggie Bush on the very first play, taking it to the house on just a zone.
But oh, how this man can change that in an eye blink. Deliver the blow to the tackler. Great quickness. Good move right there. Yeah, boy, he's got it all. Watch Toena, number 45. He's got him right here, doesn't he? Nope. How about Gibson? He's got him, right? Nope. And he loses a shoe. Watch Matua, number 51, when Reggie comes back this way. Boy, that's clipping. He hit him right in the back of the helmet with his helmet. How do you... But oh, how this man can change that in an eye blink. Deliver the blow to the tackler. Great quickness. Good move right there. Yeah, boy, he's got it all.